I'm excited to welcome Finn Sterling to the podcast. Finn is the audiobook narrator alter ego of Jess Hanks. Jess was born and raised in Columbus, Ohio. He studied theater at Otterbein College and spent some time in New York honing his craft and touring the country. After leaving NYC and living in Fort Lauderdale and Memphis, he returned to Columbus and, in no particular order, formed a theater company, taught middle school at an all-girls school, middle school theater rather, recorded and released a couple of his own CDs, and joined a band called the Martini Affair, which performs all over Ohio and surrounding states. And by day, as if he's not doing enough, Jess is a realtor helping people find the perfect home. Welcome.
Thanks.
You're a busy guy.
Yes, I am. It's I was telling somebody recently about my schedule, and they were curious as to when I slept, and it's kind of whenever I can. I mean, I can get by without a lot of sleep, so that's kind of a good thing. Yeah, I keep busy.
Because this is a lot of stuff you've got stuffed in here, and an audiobook narration on top of all of it. And of course,
yeah,
we're thrilled to have you here because you did our book, The Hockey Player's Heart, which we adored the narration that you did for it. It kind of captured Caleb and Aaron so well.
Oh, good.
How did you get started in audiobook narration with all this other creative stuff that you're already doing?
It was kind of by accident, and it was sort of an offshoot of the Martini Affair, the band that you just mentioned. We have a guy. We were playing a bar in a nearby town, and there was a guy running sound for us that night, and he introduced me to what are called in-ear monitors, and so he and I developed a really nice bond. And I asked him to come over to my house and help me with some studio stuff that I was working on. And as we were wrapping up with that little project, he says to me, well, I have to get home and get back to my studio at home because my wife and I do on-book, we do voiceover narration for audiobooks. And so I was like, oh, well, I majored in theater. And so I know about, theater and creating characters and things like that. So if you ever need some additional help, let me know. I'd love to do some work for you. And he says, yeah, that's totally cool. But I need to let you know that it is for the genre that we do is gay romance novels. And so I was like, hey, whatever, let's do it. Let's see how it goes. So like I said, it was kind of by accident, but a very happy accident. Because I've really enjoyed doing this work. I don't do theater that much anymore. The band takes up a lot of time. So this is a nice little theatrical outlet for me. I still get to perform with the band and a couple other things that I do here and there. But this is just a nice and a pretty easy, low stress way to create characters and perform in and of itself. So that's really nice.
Sure. And essentially each book is kind of a one-man show where you're doing, easily, I imagine in most of them, at least a half a dozen characters, if not more.
Yeah, at least. Yeah, usually more, but definitely anywhere from 6 to 10 is pretty normal. Yeah.
Yeah. What's your preparation as you start up a book?
The first thing that I do is I really like to see the characters in my head and see how they interact with each other and see what sort of brings them to their highs and takes them down to their lows. That's first and foremost what I do is just see them in my mind's eye. And then as I read, the more I read in the book, I sort of develop not only a visual representation of that character, but also an aural, A-U-R-A-L, representation, just how they sound and what their voices sound like and what their regional dialects might be. And are they a high voice, a low voice, nasal, in the throat, and all the things like that. And then, a big part is making sure that I know how to pronounce and understand all the words correctly that I don't see on a regular basis in my own everyday life. So I think that's the gist of it, seeing the character, hearing the character, and just understanding what makes them tick and putting that into, and it's hard, not really hard, but it is challenging figuring out a way to make them, how do you make them come across physically through hearing their voices? And so that takes a lot of visualization on the narrative And so I think those are sort of the main ways that I approach the book and each character therein.
And sounds similar to what I might expect, like if you were preparing to portray any one of these people on stage, just finding that
Absolutely,
thing.
yeah.
Except it's interesting how you mentioned trying to find the physical representation to bring that through in the audiobook. And I think to the characters that we had, where we had like the big hockey player and then the school teacher.
Uh-huh.
And physically, and then even in the book, they're described, different, because obviously the hockey player is kind of big and
Sure.
the school teacher is more your normal average Joe.
Right.
Do you have a favorite type of character to play?
I really like there's two answers to this question. I really like the sort of the witty, borderline sarcastic, sort of snitty characters sometimes. They're just so much fun to play, and especially I did one recently where that character was the narrator. It was a first person narration, so I got to play him throughout the entire book, and those are just really cool because you get to take it easy a little bit, and I like to do when lines are funny, when there's a comedic line or a bit, I like to sort of play with it a little bit and do vocally what's maybe a little unexpected. So, having a character that gets to be that way throughout the entire story is a lot of fun. So those are my favorite characters. Mm-hmm. Just the ones that are, a little, they can sometimes be a little obnoxious, but they're fun. Yeah.
What book is that? Can you give us a title?
Stalking Buffalo Bill. And it's kind of like a story where these two guys are they have these animal personas. So they're not quite werewolves, but they do change into animals under a certain set of circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Shifter books are very popular.
Yes, they are. They are.
And how often do you get to do first person? Because so often romance is in third.
Yeah, and not very often. I mean, I think of all the books I've done, and I think the number of books that I've done is somewhere between 15 and 20, maybe.
That's about right from what I've seen on Audible, yeah, with what's out at the moment.
Yeah. And I think there have maybe been two. Out of all the ones I've done, I can think of two where it was a first-person narrative or narration.
Mm-hmm. Is there a preference to that, or is it just a different set of approach?
A preference for me, you mean?
Yeah.
It's fun being able to play a character throughout the entire story. With the narrator, you have to be impartial, and you can't really give away too much of the. I think as the narrator, at least for me, I don't like to give away too much of the character's emotions, because I think then you run the risk of maybe spoiling some things somewhere further down in the story. Mm-hmm. So I like being able to really have that emotion throughout the story as the first person narrator. And you get to just having personality throughout the entire story is just, I kind of like it. It's fun.
Do you think about, as you're creating character, how you need to differentiate book to book? Like, do you try to make it aware where you're not bringing the same voice into a different book? Or because it's a different production entirely, does that really matter?
It does matter to me. I mean, I don't like, and I know that there have been some characters who do sound similar. But for me, I don't really like to repeat myself. I like to keep things different. Mm-hmm. Just because, even though there may be some characters that are very similar in terms of how they're written or how their personalities, it's still a different person. It's a different person experiencing a different set of circumstances. And so I don't like to, I'd like to put as much thought into the characters as the narrator as the writer has, into the characters they've created out of thin air.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
What appeals to you most about voicing romance? Because most of your catalog is romance, and in particular, most of it, the vast majority of it's gay romance.
Yes. It's more technical than anything else, but it's because the subject matter is a little softer and a little, in most cases, a little gentler, that it's easy on the voice. So, I can sit for, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours and not just be vocally exhausted by the end of the session. And it's nice. Romance is always nice. It's rarely is it an unhappy ending, and you're dealing with people that are, even though they're having some dark experiences and some cloudy moments throughout the story, they're optimistic, and they're putting their faith in another person, and they're putting their faith in themselves on some levels. So it's a nice mindset to be in, for that period of time.
Yeah, that's certainly true. Now, I'll cop to something that I don't think I mentioned on the show when I talked about having listened to Hockey Player's Heart. But despite the fact that it's my book and I know exactly what's happening in the story, you did manage to make me cry a couple times.
Oh, really?
Yes. Do you get swept up in the emotion of the book like that when you're narrating it? And maybe did you take a moment or something? Or
that's a really good question. And I'm trying to think. There actually, two things, and one of this is sort of a theater thing. I think any story, whether it's a play, whether it's a movie, even if it's a TV show or a book, you're dealing with people who are, while they may be normal people in their everyday lives, the writer has taken these people and put them in very important moments of their life, whether that's because they're in a romance that they never thought would ever happen, or whether it's because they have, gained superpowers, or because they've decided to take down a corporation, whatever. It's a big moment. And I think big moments, are often accompanied by tears of joy or tears of sadness, whatever, whether it's a good big moment or a bad big moment. And I actually do, now that you say that, I do remember getting a little choked up myself during Hockey Player's Heart. And I can't remember the exact scenes, but I do remember a couple times just getting a little getting a little caught up in it. So long answer to your pretty straightforward question. I think I try to get caught up as the characters. As the narrator, again, I like to be impartial, and I like to be sort of outside looking in. But as the characters, I think it's important. I think it's important to make the characters really experience what they're experiencing, and again, be able to share that and convey that to the listening audience, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does, certainly. Now, as we noted, there's a couple things that fall outside of gay romance, and you've got a couple of audiobooks that are male-female in the Indulging series, and you actually share narration duties there.
Yes.
What's that like to collaborate on something like that?
One of the things that I really like about it is, and you asked earlier about, do I try to keep my voices distinct for each story? Women's voices are really hard because I have my speaking voice is kind of low. So to try to come up with, to try to create female voices can be really challenging. So, and I think having a woman be able to, having a female narrator be able to do the female characters, it's pretty great. But I think as far as the collaborative aspect of it, we talk in advance, or at least communicate through email or text or whatever. So everybody's pretty much on the same page, and there's not really, everything is pretty written. Everything is, since it's already written out, there's not a lot of guesswork on either of our parts, so that I like it. I mean, I also like being able to hear the other side of a conversation. Hearing somebody else's voice and how I, as the character that I'm creating, react to that is kind of interesting.
Do you record together in those situations, or are they just separate? And
I think once we did, and this was a while ago, so I don't remember if we actually did record together or if we just sort of did like a quote unquote screen test, sort of an audio test for it. But I think one we did and one we didn't, and there's not a huge difference either way, at least from my experiences.
Well, we know whole duets can be done in music where the two singers are never in the same place at the same time, never even, hearing each other. So,
right.
Now you've also got the sci-fi series Empires of War, which totally different, which I'm imagining is one of the places where you need to know how everything is pronounced because it's like made up stuff in some cases.
Yeah.
How's sci-fi for you to do? I imagine you get to use your deep baritone there a little bit more, perhaps.
I do, and that was one of the interesting things about that one was I created. I don't remember the creatures' names that were the villains in that series, but I created this really gravelly, low voice, and then as we keep reading these books, more and more of these characters keep coming up, and so I had to keep figuring out a way to make each one of them different. That was tough. But that was just being in a whole other genre. It was cool being able to, sort of put yourself in a place that's not on this world, characters that are dealing with a completely different set of issues and moments. It was pretty awesome. But I still think I like the romance a little bit better.
Which might negate this next question. Are there genres you'd like to voice that you haven't yet?
Absolutely. I would love to do just like a straight up comedy book. I mean, just one that's written specifically to be funny. I just like those a lot. And there are some comedic characters in some of the books that I've done. But being in the romance genre, you don't really want to focus too much on the comedy. Otherwise, it sort of takes away from the romantic aspect of it. But I would really like to, just instead of having one funny character play off, sort of a serious character or a character who's full of self-doubt and despair, having two characters play off each other would be a lot of fun. I think that'd be a blast. And I think also, with romance, your voices have to sort of fit into a specific kind of style. At least I think you can't go too far one way or the other, or it could get a little weird. With comedy, you can really, go all out and really play around and really do some experimentation that I think would be fun too.
Well, for authors who are listening, there you go. Find the comedy, send it over to Jess, see what happens. What do you read separate from your narration? Kind of like what's on your bedside table?
I read a lot of books about real estate, just to sort of keep in that loop. I have recently, I've had a lot of classic novels on my shelves for probably for the last 5 to 10 years, and in the last 2 weeks, I picked up Moby Dick, and just I've never really had any real desire to read it. Didn't read it in high school or anything. But I have been surprised at what an engaging story it is. So that is the one piece of fiction literature that I've been reading in the last few weeks, and I haven't really picked up any fiction for a really long time. It's all been like nonfiction and biographies and things like that in the last several years. So it's nice to have a little literary escape.
Sure, and it's like totally different than what you're voicing.
Well, although I have to say, the relationship between Ishmael and Queequeg, I'm not really sure what all's going on there. There's even some things that I'm questioning if they were euphemisms. So I don't know. I don't know. It may not be it may not be all that different. It's like,
how many books do you tend to do in a month, in a year, from on the narration side?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm gonna say anywhere from, it takes me about 4 or 5 weeks, just based on my schedule, to narrate, to get through. Although the last couple ones that I did, I would just knock out, like, really long sessions during a work day. But I think a month. So anywhere from probably 8 to 12 books a year is about what I would do, I think.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Keeping it going. Let's talk a little bit about your music, just so that folks kind of know what goes on there. Now, you do have a CD available on iTunes.
Yes.
Which is pretty cool. What kind of music is happening over there? Because I have not had a chance to preview it before we got to talk.
Okay. Someone once described it as a combination of Steely Dan, Radiohead, and The Police, because, which, is great. And I can't remember, I think the chord progressions were a little Steely Dan-ish, and they said that the guitars sounded very Andy Summersy. I don't remember where the Radiohead thing came from, but it's just fairly pretty laid back music. That's a good way to put it. Pretty laid back. I'm working on some more stuff that I would like to kick it up a notch. But that's the best way I can answer that question.
And sorry, songs that you wrote, or?
Yeah, and I did all the instrumentation. I did the mixing and the mastering. I think that's one area that I would like to go back and redo, because that's my area of least experience. So I need to keep working on that. But a couple people from Germany emailed me and said, "Hey, I really like your sound. That sounds really good." So that was cool.
That's very cool. Yeah, we'll link up to it in the show notes, and people can go take a sample on iTunes.
Thank you.
And this band you've got, Martini Affair.
Yes.
What's that about?
That is about 5 people getting up and acting. First of all, doing top 40 dance music, to like Black Eyed Peas or Pitbull or Kesha. Just to name a few. And we do from 90s, 80s, contemporary. And it's about 5 people getting up, all acting like 7-year-olds that are hearing their favorite song. I mean, we just literally, if you find us on Facebook at The Martini Affair, we have a Facebook page, and you watch some of our videos. I mean, there's a lot of jumping around, a lot of just people that are really having a good time, the 5 of us.
That's how I would describe it. It's a lot of happy going on. Which is great.
Yeah, and then it's a good opportunity for people that have maybe had kind of a rough week or a stressful last few days. They can come in to wherever we're playing and have a few drinks and just cut loose for a little bit and sort of forget whatever negatives they've been experiencing in the last however long it's been.
That's very cool. We'll link up to that Facebook page too and let people check that out.
Awesome.
Now, we do have a giveaway. We've actually teamed up with Dreamspinner to give away Audible codes to 4 lucky listeners so that they can grab one of your audiobooks. And you've done some really great stuff with some authors. So it's not only including Hockey Player's Heart from us, but you've done work for Casey Wells, Mary Calmé, Stu Brown, P.D. Singer, Scotty Cade, and some others. Yes. And in the show notes, we'll have a link to the Audible listing of all of your titles so people can check that out. And we'll have a Rafflecopter on the show notes so that people can go enter some information and see about getting an audio code so they can get one of your books.
Beautiful.
How can people keep up with the Finn side of your life on social media? You're not an easy guy to find in my research.
And I was I'm like 90% certain that I started a Finn Sterling Facebook page a while ago, but I think after just not being too active on it, that Facebook decided to shut it down. And there apparently are some real life Finn Sterlings, and I don't know where they are, but I was kind of shocked to see that. So I'm going to, I think, maybe open up a Twitter account. Maybe I'll do some Instagram stuff, and who knows? Maybe I will. I'll open a Twitter account tonight. I will do that after you and I get off this call.
All right. And send that link over, and we'll link up to that in the show notes too, so people can tell you firsthand what they think of the books that you're voicing.
That'd be great. And if I do open up an Instagram account or another Facebook page, I'll put that on my Twitter feed or in Finn's Twitter.
How did you come up with the name? I mean, we should ask that, since you were surprised to find Finn Sterlings.
A friend of mine and I was on my way to, like, John, the producer, told me, you probably want to come up with a pseudonym. And so I called my friend and said, look, I got to think of a fake name, and I've got like 5 minutes to come up with this. And so, I said I want it to be something pretty masculine, but I also want it to have sort of like a cool, kind of something like a cool first name too. And so I think I came up with Finn, and she came up with Sterling, if I remember correctly. But it was either that or vice versa. But so she was just helping me think of masculine, rock hard sounding names.
It's a good name. I like it a lot. So well done to both of you for that one. And thank you for letting us out you as Jess Hanks on the podcast.
Sure.
Well, Jess, it's been awesome talking to you. Thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for a great job on Hockey Player's Heart. And when you have more books out, perhaps come back and talk to us again.
I will, Jeff. My pleasure. It's been very nice talking to you. And thanks so much for getting in touch and asking me to do this. It's been great.